Hi guys, welcome back to the next instalment of the BFG. So let's have a look at some language and make some predictions first. Have a quick recap. So some of the language you might not be sure of today is regarded. So regarded means to consider or to think. When you regard something, you're thinking deeply and reflecting on it, such as, oh, I regarded what I should be doing for your homework. Contemptuously, so that means in a scornful way that shows unkindness. So contemptuously, Mr. Matthews stared at the cake. It's because I want to eat the cake, but I know I shouldn't. And laborious. So laborious is something that takes a lot of effort. It's not enjoyable to do, such as the washing up, the cleaning can feel like it's a laborious task and it can feel like it's never going to end. And that's what laborious means. Now, I'm going to make a couple predictions and do a quick recap. So in the last chapter we read, the BFG got his revenge on those awful giants by blowing a nightmare into the flesh lump eater. And then he started a fight with the rest of them. So we've obviously met the BFG and Sophie, the blood bottler, but now we've also met the flesh lump eater. And what a horrible giant he is. So some predictions to think about. Are the Giants going to get their revenge back on the BFG, do you think? And a couple of things I've observed. What might now happen to the wonderful dream that's left now that we've used up the terrible one? And Sophie was laughing about Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk. Did anyone figure out why she was laughing about Jack and the Beanstalk? Now, it's not because she finds the story funny. Have a think about that one and let me know. Okay, so let's start reading the next instalment of the BFG, which is a really quite long chapter, but a really interesting one about dreams. We all have dreams and they're all really interesting to talk about. So let's have a look at dreams. Dreams. The big friendly giant was seated at the great table in his cave, and he was doing his homework. Sophie sat cross-legged on the table nearby, watching him at work. The glass jar containing the one and only good dream they had caught that day stood between them. The BFG, with great care and patience, was printing something on a piece of paper with an enormous pencil. What are you writing? Sophie asked him. Every dream I is having its special label on the bottle, the BFG said. How else could I be finding the one I am wanting in a hurry? But can you really and truly tell what sort of dream is going to be by simply listening to it? Sophie asked. I can, the BFG said, not looking up. But how? Is it the way it hums and buzzes? You is less or more right, the BFG said. Every dream in the world is making a different sort of buzzy hum music, and these grand swashbuckling ears of mine is able to read that music. By music, do you mean tunes? I is not meaning tunes. Then what do you mean? Human beings is having their own music, right or left? Right, Sophie said, lots of music. Sometimes human beings is very overcome when they hear wondrous music. It's getting shivers down their spindles, right or left? Right, Sophie said. So the music is saying something to them. It's sending a message. I do not think that human beings is knowing what that message is, but they is loving it just the same. I suppose that's about right, Sophie said. But because of these jump-squiffling ears of mine, the BFG said, I is not only able to hear the music that the dreams is making, but I is understanding it also. What do you mean, understanding it? Sophie said. I can read it, BFG said. It talks to me. It's like a language. Oh, I find that just a little hard to believe, Sophie said. I bet you's also finding it hard to believe in cogwinkles, the BFG said, and how they's visiting us from the stars. Of course I don't believe that, Sophie said. The BFG regarded her gravely with those huge eyes of his. I hope you will not forgive me, he said, if I tell you that human beings is thinking they is very clever, but they is not. They is nearly all of them, not munchers and squeak pips. I beg your pardon, Sophie said. The matter with human beings, BFG went on, is that he is absolutely refusing to believe in anything unless they is actually seeing it right in front of their own schnozzles. Of course, cogwinkles is existing. I mean, them oftenly. I is chittering to them. He turned away contemptuously from Sophie and resumed his writing. Sophie moved over to read what he'd written so far. The letters were printed in big and bold, but they were not very well formed. Here's what it said. This dream is about I is saving my teacher from drowning. I is diving into the river from a high bridge, and I is dragging me teacher to the bank, and I is giving him the kiss of death. The kiss of what? Sophie asked. The BFG stopped writing and raised his head slowly. His eyes rested on Sophie's face. I was telling you once before, he said quietly. I was never having a chance to go to school. I was full of mistakes. It's not my fault. I'll do my best. You is a lovely girl, but please remember that you is not exactly Miss Know Everything yourself. I'm sorry, Sophie said. I really am. It's very rude of me to keep correcting you. The BFG gazed at her for a while longer, and then he bent his head again to slow his laborious writing. Tell me honestly, Sophie said, if you blew this dream into my bedroom when I was asleep, would I really and truly start dreaming about how I saved my teacher from drowning by diving off the bridge? More, the BFG said, a lot more, but I cannot be scribbling the whole throat-thunking dream on a titchy bit of paper. Of course there is more. The BFG laid down his pencil and placed one massive ear close to the jar. For about 30 seconds, he listened intently. Yes, he said, nodding his great head solemnly up and down. The dream is continuing. Very nice. It is a very dory hunky ending. How does it end? Sophie said, please tell me. You would be dreaming, the BFG said, that the morning after you were saving the teacher from the river, you was arriving at school and you were seeing all the 500 pupils sitting in assembly hall and all the teachers as well. And the head teacher is standing up and saying, I is wanting the whole school to give 3 cheers to Sophie because she is so brave and is saving the life of our fine arithmetic teacher, Mr. Figgins, who was unfortunately pushed off the bridge into the river by our gym teacher, Miss Amelia Upscotch. So 3 cheers for Sophie. And the whole school is then cheering like mad and shouting, bravo, well done. And forever after that, even when you was getting all your sums, guns, swizzled and muggled up, Mr. Figgins is always giving you 10 out of 10 and writing, good work, Sophie, in your exercise book. And then you was waking up. Oh, I like that dream, Sophie said. Of course you like it, the BFG said. It's a fizz wizard. He licked the back of the label, stuck it on the jar. I was usually writing a bit more than this on the labels, but you was watching me and it's making me jumpsy. I'll go and sit somewhere else, Sophie said. Oh, don't go. Look at the jar carefully, and I think you'll be seeing this dream. Sophie peered in the jar, and there, sure enough, she saw the faint translucent outline of something about the size of a hen's egg. There was just a touch of colour in it, a pale green, soft and shimmering, and very beautiful. There it lay, in this small oblong green, sea green jellyish thing. At the bottom of the jar, quite peaceful, but pulsing gently. The whole of it moving in and out ever so slightly, as though it were breathing. It's moving, Sophie cried. It's alive. Of course it's alive. What do you feed it on? Sophie asked. It's not needing any food, BFG told her. That's cruel. Everything alive needs some sort of food, even trees and plants. The north wind is alive, the BFG said. It's moving. It touches you on the cheek and the hands, but nobody's feeding it. Sophie was sighing. This extraordinary giant was disturbing her ideas. He seemed to be leading her towards mysteries that were beyond her understanding. A dream is not needing anything, the BFG went on. If it's a good one, it is waiting peacefully forever until it's released and allowed to do its job. If it's a bad one, it's always fighting to get out. The BFG stood up and walked over to one of the many shelves and placed the latest jar among the thousands of others. Please, can I see some other of the dreams? Sophie asked him. The BFG hesitated. Nobody's ever seen them before, he said, but perhaps, after all, I was letting you have a peep. He picked her up off the table and stood her on the palm of one of his huge hands and carried her to the shelves. Here's some of the good dreams, he said, the fizz wizards. Would you hold me closer so I can read the labels? Sophie said. My labels is only telling bits of it. The dreams are usually much longer. The labels is just to remind me. Sophie started to read the labels. The first one seemed long enough to her. It went round the jar, and as she read it, she kept turning the jar. This is what it said. Today I was sitting in class and I discovered that if I was staring very hard at my teacher in a special way, I was able to put her to sleep. So I start staring at her, and in the end, her head drops down on her desk and she goes fast asleep and snorkles loudly. Then in marches the head teacher and he shouts, Wake up, Miss Plumridge! How dare you go to sleep in class? Go fetch your hat and coat and leave this school forever. You are sacked. In a jiffy, I was putting the head teacher to sleep as well. and he just crumples slowly to the floor like a lump of jelly. And there he lies, all in a heap, and starts snorkeling even louder than Miss Plumridge. And then I is hearing my mummy's voice saying, "Wake up, your breakfast is ready." Right, guys, stare at the screen. I want to see if you can put me to sleep by staring. No, I'm not tired yet. More of you need to stare at the screen, harder, like this. Oh, right. What a funny dream, Sophie said. It's a ring beller, the BFG said. It's a whoopsie. Inside the jar, just below the edge of the label, Sophie could see the putting to sleep dream lying peacefully on the bottom, pulsing gently, sea green like the other one, but perhaps a trifle larger. Do you have separate dreams for boys and girls? Sophie asked. Of course, the BFG said. If I was giving a girl dream to a boy, even if it was really Wopsy's girl dream, the boy would be waking up and thinking what a rock-bunking, grid-slugging old dream that was. Boys would, Sophie said. There's here is all the girls' dreams on the shelf. Can I read a boy's dream? You can, BFG said, and he lifted her to a higher shelf. The label on the nearest boy's dream jar read as follows. I was making myself a marvellous pair of suction boots, and when I put them on, I was able to walk straight up the kitchen wall and across the ceiling. Well, I was walking upside down on the ceiling when my big sister comes in, and she is starting to yell at me, as she always does, yelling, "What on earth is you doing up there walking on the ceiling?" I looks down at her and I smiles and I says, "I told you was driving me up the wall, and now you has done it." I find that one rather silly, Sophie said. Boys wouldn't, BFG said. It's another ring beller. Perhaps you've seen enough now. Let me read another boy's one, Sophie said. The next label said. The telephone rings in our house and my father picks it up and says he's very important in his very important telephone voice. "Simpson speaking." And his face goes white and his voice goes all funny. He says, "What? Who?" And then he says, "Yes, sir, I understand, sir, but surely it is me as you is wishing to speak to, not my little son." My father's face is going from white to dark purple, and he's gulping like he has a lobster stuck in his throat. And then at last he is saying, "Yes, sir, very well, sir, I'll get him, sir." And he turns to me and says in a rather respectful voice, "Is you knowing the President of the United States?" And I says, "No, but I expect he is hearing about me." Then I was having a long talk on the phone and saying things like, "Let me take care of it, Mr. President. You'll bungle it all up if you do it your way." My father's eyes is goggling right out of his head. And then when I was hearing my father's real voice saying, "Get up, you lazy slob, or you'll be late for school." Boys are crazy, Sophie said. Let me read the next one. Sophie started reading the next label. I was having a bath and I was discovering if I press quite hard on my tummy button, the funny feeling comes all over me and suddenly my legs nor my arms. In fact, I has become absolutely invisible all over. I'm still there, but no one can see me, not even myself. So my mummy comes in and says, "Where is that child? He was in the bath a minute ago and can't possibly have washed himself properly." So I says, "Here I is." And she says, "Where?" And I says, "Here." And she says, "Where?" And I says, "Here." And she yells, "Henry, come up quick." And when Daddy rushes in and I is washing myself and my daddy sees the slope floating around in the air, well, of course he is not seeing me and he shouts, "Where are you, boy?" And I says, "Here." And he says, "Where?" And I says, "Here." And he says, "Where?" And I say, "Here." And he says, "The soap, boy, the soap, it's flying in the air." Then I press my tummy button again and now it's visible. My daddy is squiffy with excitement and he says, "You is the invisible boy." And I says, "Now I was going to have some fun. So when I was out of the bath, I have dried myself. I put on my dressing gown and slippers and press my tummy button again to become invisible. And I go down into the town and walk in the streets. Of course, only me is invisible, but not the things I was wearing when people were seeing a dressing gown and slippers floating along the street with nobody in it. There is a panic with everybody yelling, "Oh, guys, there goes!" And people were screaming left and right, and big, strong policemen is running for their lives. And best of all, I see Mr. Grummet, my algebra teacher, coming out of a pub, and I float up to him and I says, "Boo!" And he lets out a frightsome howl and dashes back into the pub. And then I was waking up and feeling happy as a whisk-squiddler. Pretty ridiculous, Sophie said. All the same, she couldn't resist reaching down and pressing her own tummy button to see if it worked. I'm going to try now. No, you guys try. Let me know if you've disappeared. Dreams is very mystical things, the BFG said. Human beings is not understanding them at all. Not even the brainiest professors is understanding them. Have you seen enough? Just this last one, this one here. She started reading. I have written a book and it's so exciting nobody can put it down. As soon as you read the first line, you're so hooked you cannot stop until the last page. In all the cities, people is walking in the streets, bumping into each other because their faces is buried in my book. Dentist is reading it and trying to fill teeth at the same time, but nobody minds because they is all reading it too in the dentist chair. Drivers is reading it while driving and cars is crashing all over the country. Brain surgeons is reading it while they're operating on brains, and airline pilots reading it and going to Timbuktu instead of London. Football players is reading it on the field because they can't put it down, and so is Olympic runners while they is running. Everybody has to see what's going to happen next in my book. And when I wake up, I'm still tingling with excitement at being the greatest writer in the world has ever known. Until my mummy comes in and says I was looking at your English exercise book last night, and really, your spelling is atrocious, and so is your punctuation. That's enough for now, the BFG said. There is Dillians, but my arm is getting tired from holding you up. Oh, all those over there. Why have they got such tiny labels? That is because one day I was catching so many dreams I was not having my time or energy to write long labels, but there is enough to remind me. Can I look? The long-suffering BFG carried her across the jars she was pointing to, and Sophie read them one after another. I was climbing Mount Everest with just my pussycat for company. I was inventing a car that runs on toothpaste. I was able to make it to the electric lights go on and off just by wishing it. I was only an 8-year-old little boy, but I was growing a splendid bushy beard and all the other boys is jealous. I was able to jump out of any high window and float down safely. I has a pet bee that makes rock and roll music when it flies. What amazes me, Sophie said, is how you ever learnt to write in the first place. Ah, the BFG said. I've been wondering how long before you asking me that. Considering you never went to school, I think it's quite marvellous. How did you learn? The BFG crossed the cave and opened a tiny secret door in the wall. He took out a book, very old and tattered. By human standards, it was ordinary size, but it looked like a postage stamp in his huge arm. One night, I said, I was blowing a dream through a window and I seized this book lying on a little boy's bedroom table. I wanted it so very badly, you understand? But I was refusing to steal it. I would never do that. So how did you get it? I borrowed it. Just for a short time. And how long have you had it? Perhaps about 80 years, the BFG said. Soon I'll pull it back. And that's how you taught yourself to write. I was reading it hundreds of times, and I was still reading it and teaching new words to myself and how to write them. It's the most scrumdiddly-umptious story. Sophie took a look at the book. Nicholas Nickleby, she read out loud. By dull chickens, the BFG said. By who? Just then came a tremendous galloping of feet from outside the cave. What's that? Sophie cried. Then all the giants slipped fizzling off to another country to go to human beings, the BFG said. He quickly popped Sophie into his waistcoat pocket. They hurried to the cave entrance and rolled back the stone. Sophie, peeping out of her spy hole, saw all 9 of the fearsome giants coming past at full gallop. Where's you off to tonight? Shouted the BFG. We is all off flushbunkling to England tonight, answered the flesh lump eater as they went galloping. England is a luxurious land and we is fancying a few new little English chidlers. I, shouted the maid masher, is knowing where there is a giggle house for girls and I is guzzing myself full as a froth blower. And I knows where there is a boggle box for boys, shouted the gizzle gumper. All I have to do is reach in and grab myself a handful. English boys is tasting extra lick swishy. In a few seconds, the 9 galloping giants were out of sight. What did he mean? Sophie said, poking her head out of the pocket. What is a giggle house for girls? He's meaning a girls' school, the BFG said. He will be eating them in a bundle. Oh no, cried Sophie. And the boys from a boys' school, said the BFG. It can't happen, Sophie cried out. We've got to stop them. We can't just sit here and do nothing. There's not a thing we can do. We's helpless as horse feathers. We sat down on a large craggy blue rock near the entrance to his cave. He took Sophie from his pocket and put her beside him on the rock. It's now quite safe for you to be outside until day is coming back, he said. The sun dipped below the horizon, and it was getting dark. Wow, we've learned so much about the BFG in that story, in that chapter of the story. We've learned his interpretation of the dreams and how they can have an effect on the people. What an amazing chapter again. Okay, so More tomorrow. Speak to you soon.